What's up, everyone? This is Anto Philip, and I'm the CEO and co founder at Under 25. Today, I woke up, and guess what I'm doing? I'm at Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar, and you're going to have a blast listening to this.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode, a conversation with the CEO and co-founder of the Under 25 universe, Anto Philip. Stay tuned. The youth are our future, and the future is now. So I've recently been asking myself about what it feels like to be a young global citizen right now, where natural optimism and exuberance are often kept muzzled and in check. And why? Of course, speaking of optimism and exuberance, thank you for listening and sharing it with your friends and family, for rating, downloading, and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and for following us on the socials at Dr. Abhay Dandekar. So in thinking about youth who are beginning an exploration into a life of global citizenship, often as students, there seem to be important and additive layers that help build self-assurance, preserve optimism, and create an empowerment to enter societies and economies with fresh knowledge and experience. But to help find these layers quickly, in a democratized, scaled, and sustainable way, you need to at least have an understanding and even a conceptual disruption of what current institutional frameworks are, and an imagination to charge youth with energy, positive reinforcement, and accelerators to successfully, be themselves. Anto Philip, the co-founder and CEO of the Under 25 universe, is among those who's trying to build this framework of responsible progress and empowerment within India's student community across media, tech, and live events. Anto's been relentlessly seeking to unlock the grand potential of youth by simply taking them seriously. The Under 25 universe operates to build youth culture, galvanize student leadership, and impact the student wallet. Combining data, art, storytelling, social media, entrepreneurship, and innovation, Anto and the Under 25 universe are building a culture through values and customs that prioritize curiosity, exploration, and enabling, without the common labels of age and personality avatars. We had a chance to catch up and chat, and it was nearly impossible not to be magnetically drawn to Anto's enthusiasm and passion.
I'm overjoyed. Like I said, I woke up with one word this morning: ecstatic. And I promise to bring that energy through this podcast.
You have to have an exuberance and an excitement about you to galvanize and harness momentum, particularly when not only just the substrate of people and populations that you're dealing with are youth, but the external microscope on youth is so strong from so many different layers and so many different angles. Is that exuberance and that excitement, has this always come easy for you?
What a beautiful question. I think, let me just share a quick story. I was in college, I think 7 years back, I graduated. I was that student who was extremely passionate about what happened outside of the classroom. And what I mean by that is I grew up as a student who enjoyed, okay, this is the classroom, there's a lot of learning, science, math, social science, great, everything is amazing. I'm going through my books, I write my exams. I don't see, myself in that narrative, right? Like I did what I had to do. Even
Yeah.
growing up, I mean, from my first grade, I would be the kid who'd be like, oh, there is a chocolate picking competition, I'll go pick chocolates. Or there's a this whatever, and I'll go to the whatever and do the whatever. And anything under the sun. And I'd give a lot of credit to church and community and everything that happened with that, which also made me feel like I have to participate. And with active participation, I realized, today it's looked down upon, this word, but I would say it with so much self conviction. I was irrationally optimistic. I
Mm.
am irrationally optimistic. I want to be irrationally optimistic. The reason why I say that is because this story leads to a very integral point in my life. I spent a lot of time outside of the classroom. My parents, I mean, I was in every debate, every quiz, every this, every that, and I grew an unfair amount of advantage in myself, right? Like I just had a lot more flavor or a lot more layers to the person that I was because of my these
Mm.
unique experiences. And I almost felt like it's a criminal offense that the rest of the country's young people don't like are not celebrated, or there is no assessment outside of that, academic excellence. And I said my academic excellence didn't give me the layers, it gave me the curiosity and the depth, but the layers of understanding that and playing across and oscillating across those levels of learning and consciousness only comes when you actively participate very consistently. And that it was my optimism, the optimism to say that I can't be the only one who
Yeah.
believes this is reality. You learn a lot more outside of the classroom than within the classroom. I happen to be born in the world's youngest population. I'm blessed with parents who gave me education. What have I had to complain? I'm irrationally optimistic about a
Mm.
generation. I'm irrationally optimistic about youngsters. I'm irrationally optimistic about how young India is going to be at the forefront of that revolution, of that moment.
Tell me one thing. First off, it's not a surprise that if you feel this way, the first thing, the question that you probably ask is, well, why doesn't everybody feel this way, right? It's like, it's a natural,
You have no idea.
right?
You have no idea.
um,
It baffles me.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. And I wonder though if someone whose optimism is abound and they are so self-realized like that, does it lend itself for others around you to sometimes not maybe take you seriously?
Absolutely. And that's my one liner. In fact, the only reason I'm an irrational optimist was because if I had to rationalize my optimism, but nobody was rationalizing it with me. So it got really hard to be taken seriously. In fact, I think that's going to be a lifelong pursuit to be taken seriously. And what I mean by seriously is young people and students. And let's break that into two categories. Being young is cultural and driven by mind and spirit much more than body of work. But being a student is driven by body of work much more than mind and spirit. And what I mean by that is you're a role player as a student, but you are in a phase of life as a youngster, and it coincides.
Sure.
Let me unpack, what the single question that I had as I set out on this journey. I said, I am a student, and if I'm the first student of this realization, of this learning, of this whatever insight, what does it take for a student to be taken seriously? And I
Mm.
will, post qualify three parts of that, which is taking a student seriously. Student here being anyone who's academically enrolled in a course or a career path.
Sure.
And being taken seriously here means not seriousness in terms of, oh, I get students, or colleges will give you right education, or all of that. I say seriousness here means being an economic contributor to the economy by active participation should not be delayed until you graduate,
Yeah.
because I feel like young people are capable much more than the people who are building for young people can ever build for them. I believe that it's in my system to know that, because I am the first student to ask that question to myself.
Mm.
What does it take to be taken seriously? And I think if you don't have money in your wallet, and if you don't have agency in an economy, that's when you're not taken seriously. And I think if we can build a student economy or a youth economy that has that kind of relevance and impact, not just by attention, which is our eyeballs, but by actual means of contribution, economic contribution, I think there will be a day when young people will be, or me as a first student will be taken seriously, because those numbers everybody gets.
Well, and in that way, it's hard. First off, it's great and valuable to unpack that. It's harder, I think, for institutions to come to that conclusion automatically. So there's some obvious change making that you and your teams are in fact venturing upon. In that same vein, because the pace of change from generation to generation is so rapid, and especially for the last 5 to 10 years. Does it harder to make that vision more of an evergreen one that's lasting, or does the skeptic who's around there say that, well, this is lovely, but in 3 years this will all be different?
Absolutely. I think a great way to, for me to have made sense of that moment in my life is that, Anto, what's the game here? Are you a medium
Yeah,
player or a matter player? Right? What's the game? One can play as many games, and I'm not judgmental to any game. I mean, hear me out on this. There is no right or wrong game, period. It's the game that works for you. It's the game that drives you out of the bed. It's the game that, gets you into the playing field every single day. And whatever that is, so be it, so that you can, sleep at night with that conviction and that happiness. And if that is, how I'd call a game, and then, I had to look at myself and say, what kind of a player are you? What's the court I'm on, and what game am I playing? And I'd said, so Anto, it's pretty straightforward. What do you want? Like, do you want to be the best filmmaker of all time, or is film a tool? Or do you want to become the best app builder of all time? And then, or is app just a tool? Or do you want to build a festival, and so on and so forth, right? And then, if all of these are tools, and all of these were mediums of massive disruption and scale and opportunity, matter never changes. Albert Einstein's still relevant, or like thousands
yeah,
of people who've built it based on matter, which in this case essentially means what's at the core, what's first principle that you will stand by for the test of time, or rather
yeah,
want to impact or insightfully, analytically, work towards, to build a tectonic shift, to have a movement in the plane of the earth. You need to have that amount of conviction and first principle that drives you much beyond the medium. So I think disruption will continue to happen at every minute of, I think, this journey of my life, across
yeah,
every medium that has ever existed. Words are only like recently invented. I mean, if you look at evolution at large. So
right,
before that, people communicated through sounds, and I think that's not ever going to change. But if something stood the test of time, it stood
yeah.
because it was heavily ingrained in a lived experience that had complete conviction. And I thought the game here was to stand the test of time. And my matter, we said matter over medium. Like I said, the what does it take to take the students seriously? And for them to be taken seriously, we need to be able to show the world student change making power. And I think that can surpass any medium, any disruption, anything that happens ever, because all of them becomes tools to showcase how you stand the test of time with respect to student change making power.
Well, trying to be transcendent in that
Yes.
way, and
Yeah.
let that actually pervade, no matter what
Yes.
generation, no matter what population, or no matter what community is looking at that. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Anto Philip. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with CEO and co founder of the Under 25 Universe, Anto Philip. You mentioned sort of a shared experience, and I'm curious about one thing. Past generations under 25, my generation, generations before and after mine and yours, they've navigated through various cultural accelerators and even trauma, and major accelerators in trauma, right? Whether it be technology, whether it be war, whether it be economic hardship, or great times. But they were often shared human experiences that everybody maybe went through at the same time, at the same pace, with the same outlook, depending on their circumstances. Is that harder to accomplish in a digital era where both connectivity and singular unique experiences are so diverse and so prevalent, and for that matter, so democratized?
Wow. What I love about it is the questions are so beautifully in line with my obsession in the few last few months and years of how I've been thinking looking at,
Yeah.
one has to frame life to have some POV, otherwise it's Wild West. Um,
Right. Chaos.
yeah, it's chaos. So, I mean, these are some of the moments of framing for myself, and that sort of allowed me to have some amount of deeper conviction, or rather, trust me, I know what I'm doing moment.
Is the idea that like how people connect and develop human relationships forms in some ways their shared bond and their shared experience, but in
Yeah,
a digital platform, in a digital era, everyone's experience with this can be quite unique and quite separate and in
yeah,
parallel as opposed to
yeah.
collectively together.
Absolutely. So the one liner that I would lead with in that realm is, by and large, I think what's going to happen to all generations moving forward, and the generation of present and the generation of the past, was three massive encounters. The encounters are in self, surrounding, and sensation.
Mm.
You encounter yourself a lot more quicker in this generation than any generational development that has ever happened. By sheer means, it's not our madness, or it's not like, whoa, we were geniuses, or none of that. It's because of evolution. Evolution has led for hyper connectivity today, and hyper
Yeah,
connectivity has led to whatever, digital experiences having same amount of emotional baggage that a physical experience or emotional euphoria as a physical experience would have ever had. And thereby
right.
these experiences are happening at ridiculously fast pace, and which means you are also encountering yourself a lot more than any other generation has ever encountered the self. And but the
Sure.
faculties of any system that's ever built around us has never built for that kind of encounter of self that quickly, including parenting, including everything, right? Like, thousand
Yeah,
things are not prepared for that kind of encounter of self. And the second is encounter with the surrounding, which means with that kind of hyper awareness and that kind of also feeling and sensing and believing, and instant gratification, and your all of that creates your surrounding. So your surrounding is also very different from the surrounding of any other generation. And I think
mm,
thereby the self interacting with the surrounding is drastically different. And again,
sure.
nobody is prepared for that interaction. And I'm not saying this is only unique to this generation. It's literally every
Right.
evolutionary journey is going to be like this. But
Yeah.
I think the pace, the momentum, the dynamic, the approach, the mediums, everything are equally growing with that evolution, because the self is creating it. So you will see a lot more mental health hospitals than physical health hospitals leading forward in the
Yeah.
next decade. You will see, and these are all just by nature of evolution. These need to exist because the encounter self is so crazy. Oh my god, I feel so much, and then
Yeah.
I'm in that feeling with the world. But if I feel so much and participate, and I have this about everything, then how can I be a part of the surrounding? So then you have some
Right.
amount of learning to say that this is my behavior, or this is my attitude towards life. Then from there you go into sensation, which is all sensory, all senses are equally participating. And I think for the first time, the youngster's life is so sensory, across all six senses, both emotionally and physically. For everybody who's literally wondering, Anto, what do you do, and why are you talking about all of these things, you sound so esoteric. The reason why I have reached this realm is because that's just me as a first student of the under 25 universe. Walk in, take a student seriously, walk into a college, sit them down, treat them like an adult, and have this conversation. They will blow your mind a little more than I have blown your mind. I promise that is a reality. I live amidst that reality, but that is only my frame. And I'm requesting the whole world to see young people like that. They are the center of this evolution, not the other way around.
I have a question that sort of centers somewhat on that.
Mm.
Does the success of building a system of values and culture around what you just said, those customs, those idioms that are trying to work in that framework, once that attracts youth, does that ever imply that their parents, communities, institutions, in some ways are failing to build a culture and value and system that that you're talking about?
Absolutely. And we cannot this the 100% truth about where we are today is we cannot prescribe and we can't be prescriptive to a generation that has finally come across three layers of evolution that is immediate, which means my grandparents were prioritizing survival, my parents were prioritizing security, and here comes a generation which is all about attitude and which is all about choice, and you can choose what you want, you can
Expression. Yeah.
expression, and it is highly individual, and it's surrealism meeting hyperrealism meeting self. So you are ranged out in encounters, you are going from point A to point B so regularly, much more regularly than many other people would have gone, or many other generations would have gone, because of hyperconnectivity, and which is why
Mm.
digital is explosive, which is why connections are, the strand of connection is a lot more thinner than the connection physically. But can we
Yeah.
build cultures around responsible progress? Can we give tools for them to have self discovery and thereby conviction, as opposed to telling this is right or wrong? Can we celebrate confusion instead of romanticizing clarity? Can we also
Sure.
say it's a cosmic journey, so laugh at yourself as much as you want to be the legend of all time? So the duality is supposed to be celebrated as opposed to looked at as, oh my god, like I'm here to happiness for happiness, or I'm here for this outcome or that outcome.
It sounds like a incredible journey of self realization for our youth. I'm curious about one thing, and that is, as the great almost solidifying of the self and that self realization happens for our youth at a much quicker pace, does it mean perhaps that the sense of community that they develop is a little bit more fragile and a little bit more fleeting in that matter? Because it's so powerful for the self and in the individual. Does it mean that it's easier to weave in and out of tribes and communities
Yeah,
and those kinds of networks and relationships are perhaps become more fragile because of that strong
yeah.
self?
I have a data-driven answer for that, and a vision-based answer for that, which is
I was
behavioral.
hoping
But
you would say that.
yeah, right. The data-driven answer is they are going to go in and inner and out and outer, which means they will they can, I mean, young people can go really deep now into oneself and
Yeah.
thereby have a significant amount of self conviction for even to invest themselves in a community so deeply that their active participation might just be 1,000 times more than any community that they would have ever participated in, which means student clubs are going to become, let's say, decentralized autonomous organizations in itself, and that itself will have a significant amount of ownership and provenance and impact and so on and so forth. That is data driven to say that 100% richer connections and communities are going to exist in this generation.
Mm.
But also the generational growth has allowed us to say that you don't have to be one thing. So the
Yeah.
range of your investment in a community, or your a depth, or a certain, I call it a subculture, or any of these communities that you're a part of, will vary. So there will be a student who has 1,000, or like a young person who's so deep in their community that nobody can debate that, versus also participate as a same person in another community as just a bystander, in another community
Yeah.
as the one who just is going to the next one, and this range will keep going on. And I think what I'm trying to say is there will be a very rich community experience, and thereby it is going to be accepted in this generation to have many me's, as opposed to just have this individual creation of self, which is just one role player, Anto Philip the
Yeah.
engineer, Anto Philip the whatever, right? Like, as opposed to
Right.
Anto Philip the empath, Anto Philip the the one who likes
The
to talk.
ambivert.
Yes,
The Yep.
so on and so forth. The introvert, the this, the
Right.
that, the
Yeah.
ambiverted introvert, and the permutations
Right.
and combinations of all of that, and everything is going to exist. And I'm so excited to for the world to see that.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Anto Philip. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Richa Morjani, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with CEO and co founder of the Under 25 Universe, Anto Philip. I'm listening to you speak and I'm listening to this dialogue. And in my head, I'm thinking in the past and even in the present, thought leaders and innovators who have a great feel for the
Hmm.
temperature of the
Hmm.
culture, and especially for youth culture, or they maybe even have an excellent barometer for kind of understanding the needs and the gaps and the strengths of a community. You mentioned this just now. How much of this for you is instinct versus data gathering versus rapid testing and iteration? Um, is a lot of this kind of learning on the fly? Is it also just sort of like, nope, I know, I have conviction. This is the way that I think it's going to go.
I think beautiful question, one line answer. I urge for everyone, this is from my team, also for every student in our universe, also for every thought leader in the world, to look at life
Yeah,
from the POV right now, to actually appreciate duality as hybrids, right? I don't think that we're going to have a digital world. I don't think we're going to have a
yeah,
physical world. I don't think, it's going to be data driven. I don't think it's going to be only intuitive. These are all extremes. I urge for everybody to be analytical artists. What I
sure.
mean by that is, follow primarily follow your intuition, and then back that up with analysis, and then use that analysis to deeper the intuition, and it's a full-fledged process, which means every time you have new insight, you want to back it up with more amount of depth, but with active participation. So then you are
Yeah,
proving what you are believing by delivery, not by intuition, not by art.
yep,
Artists are esoteric, and because they range in their level of consciousness, and they're awesome. But an artist is not looked at as business, or transaction, or this or that, and what percentage are you growing, and how much of the paint are you using in your art. And I think that's very different in approach. I said that's the turning pro approach. So when you turn pro, you are looking at every detail, every data, every touch point, everything, just to make yourself move with a dance, with a little more finesse in your approach. And I think once you gather that level of hybridness, you just
yeah,
start appreciating everything a little more. And because you're
yep.
looking at life from that lens, as opposed to one intuitive lens or one analytical lens.
Thinking about that, right? Do you ever fear that the system and the design and the culture that you're building, or this under 25 universe that you're helping to shape, do you ever fear it itself becoming more of a centralized institution?
Absolutely. I think, that's the only way evolution can really happen. I think some days some
Yeah,
kid will be 1,000 times smarter than I ever was in understanding everything that I have current access to. And that kid will
yeah.
say, hey, this is the institution that built all of these things. And let's, try and put them to test so that, we can now be better than that. And I think as it should be. And I think every student should have the chance to want to have better. And as I did, and as I wanted, and I went out on this question, if that's given me a smile on my face, and if that's what is going to help another student to look at it and say, I want to do better, so be it. And I want to celebrate and appreciate it. And I'm not at the, this is not a game based on fear. It's a game based on love. And I want to, and I prioritize this to say that let's operate with love and care as opposed to fear and anger.
I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink, who's this master writer on motivation. And he talks about the workforce being motivated by autonomy and mastery and purpose, a sense of purpose at least. Many of the levers that are generated in the work environment basically are relevant to wealth and power.
Hmm.
So, from that end, who gets to own this movement? Is there still a consumer someplace? Is there still a producer someplace?
Yeah.
Are those stakeholders out there in an open market? Or is the vision a lot more democratized than I'm characterizing?
I love it. Decentralization at scale it's a transformative process across so many layers of centralization. So
Yeah,
one can't say that overnight things are going to change. I think it's a mindset change. And what essentially is going to happen is, regardless of us liking it or not, good or bad, things will get decentralized over a period of time, only because by
yeah,
means of evolution, if you look at patterns, this is how it's always been. What's going to happen is that the whole world is going to turn into a decentralized society, which is, digitally existing, and will have those many layers of interaction as we would have had physically. and
Sure.
and there, but if I have a blue tick and that gives me so much emotional value, then just imagine if I have a digital asset that's grown by X amount of money, I'd be as euphoric and excited as buying a home at Burj Khalifa. Like, so
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is these are still individual emotions. I mean, you get what I'm saying? And that can be decentralized. For a DSOC to exist, you need a great layer of
Yeah.
decentralized education in which you as a participant in the decentralized society will be growing. It's an ever growing, it's like a soul bound token, which is what I say.
Yeah.
You grow in this DSOC as that citizen with that level of your participation, everything documented on a verifiable blockchain which you completely own, which nobody has access to. So nobody owns anything except for
Yeah.
themselves. That's the self. And everybody participates for more ownership in the identity that they are after, or in the information that they are after, in the curiosity that they have exquisite interest in. And
So
thereby, I think,
your equity is hopefully building
yes,
because of how much knowledge or how much acquisition you're
yes,
gaining.
and how much active participation is there thereby.
Sure.
So acts of service and acts of performance will define your relevance in a decentralized society, and that will create its own status, which will create the same problems that society has in what we are seeing today. It will have its own
Right.
governments, it'll have its own religion. So we're not running away from being human. I mean, come on, like, we are
Yeah.
still human beings no matter
Right.
what tool we use. So nothing is going to essentially change. Everything is going
Yeah.
to be exactly, it just has new mediums.
Sure.
Thereby, the problems we'll face is going to be so exciting that, who owns it? To be really honest, every network participant owns it. So thereby, the turbulence is also that high because every network
Hmm.
participant says I own it. So
Right.
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
And I think there's some high value to that. Let me ask the inevitable question.
Hmm.
How do you teach or steer or build a
Hmm.
culture of youth that feels comfortable with aging?
Beautiful. I always say that, the only thing that we have to try and help a student understand is, because a predominant part of your youth life is being a student and, put into that box, is that you actually not going, you young and old are, basically nothing different. It's all, we are all boxing ourselves because of X, Y, and Z. And there will be no young and old. It's a student and a graduate, or basically, are you a explorer or are you an enabler? Or
Yeah.
that's what is going to happen. And wherever you are an explorer, you have to be young in emotion, and wherever you are an enabler, you have to be a pro at heart, so you can allow every explorer to feel that. So there is no young and old, and the highest realm of this game, it's an explorer and an enabler. It's levels of
Yeah.
that, and you can be an explorer in one and enabler in another, and it's not defined by age. So aging sort of really takes a back seat, because curiosity, takes the forefront. Or how deep you're in that space of curiosity, with the breadth of your participation, the depth versus breadth of that moment is your age in that curiosity. And thereby, you're playing across, you're a student for life, and you're also
Yeah.
a pro for life. And so, in which room are you a pro, and in which room are you a student? And thereby, that is your young and old of evolution.
I love it. Someone who's experiencing your work and the journey of the under 25 universe, how do you hope they feel when they turn 26? What do you hope their transformation in some ways is hitting them
It's
as?
my real hope is, because they have graduated from this universe, they become the biggest believers in the universe, and thereby do 1,000 times more than what they would have done as a student, because they understand the value of it. So what I mean by that is 70% of my team are under 25 graduates, people who've gone through our system, people who've seen this evolution for themselves. So I feel like that's going to happen at scale, and there will be more and more people who will just actively participate in the outer space. And that's what I say, that's the under 25 universe, and that's the outer space. Your active participation in the universe is to enable everyone who are there in the under 25 universe because you were once that and you got that. And so thereby, what's the best way to give it. And we say when you graduate, we say you should be defined by how much you give as opposed to how much you take.
Yeah. Well, I think the exuberance and the excitement and the inspiration, frankly, is creating lots and lots of universes out there that are absolutely making our youth better for it. Anto, thank you
Absolutely.
so much for spending some time with us. I'd love to do this again sometime soon.
We have to do a lot more of this. And I promise I'm happy to continue this conversation, even if this was not a podcast, because guess what? It doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, all that, one needs to have is great conversations, and conversations are art. And as long as, even if there are 10 people listening, even if it's just the two of us, it's equally impactful and powerful.
Thanks so much, Anto. And you can check out more at under25universe.com. This month, I'm in the middle of growing my mustache, supporting men's cancer research and mental health resources through the Movember Foundation. So if you have a chance, please check out some magical mustache photos and consider donating via the link in my Instagram bio. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.